There was a lady called Jean Rayborg, who'd been a very successful university teacher, but she fell into depression and was eventually put into a psychiatric institution. She didn't want to take her medication, so she was kept in the psychiatric institution, and she was heavily drugged for a large period of the time. After she'd been there about 2 years or so, her parents went to a meeting where Paul Kane, who was a guy who moved in the word of knowledge quite a lot, was there. And so they asked Paul Kane to pray for their daughter, Jean. And he did pray for her, and as he got to the end of the meeting, he said he would continue to pray. As he left and got into his car, he felt God spoke to him, and God spoke to him and said, if you will drive to San Diego, which is where the woman was in the psychiatric hospital, if you will drive to San Diego and pray for this woman, I will heal her for my glory, and she will become a missionary for me. So he decided the very next day he would drive to San Diego, but he didn't know where he was going, and he'd been told that no one could go and visit the woman, only her husband was allowed to go and visit her. So he drove to San Diego, and he decided he was asking God, where should I come off the freeway? He came off the freeway at a certain point, and then he rang up the family home and spoke to the lady's daughter and said, could you tell me where your mother is in the psychiatric hospital? She said she couldn't tell him, she wasn't allowed to. And he said, okay, I'm going to get back in my car and I'm going to pray, and I believe God will tell me where she is. And then I'm going to ring you back, and I'd like you to confirm it if I tell you where I think she is. So he got in his car, and he felt God put 2 words on his heart, which were Mesa Vista. So he then rang up the girl's daughter, Janelle, and said to her, is your mother in Mesa Vista Psychiatric Hospital? And she said, yes. And so he said, right, okay, I'm going to go and visit her. And she said, well, they won't allow you in. Only my dad is allowed to visit. He went to the door, and he was allowed in. Nobody knows why. Obviously, I think we do, because God orchestrated it. And he went up to the woman's room, and he prayed with her. And he said, in 3 days, you will be completely healed, and you will leave this psychiatric hospital and never come back here again, and you will become a missionary for me. In 3 days, she did leave that hospital. But actually, before she left, he said to her, and when you're a missionary, he said, there are 2 ladies in your neighborhood who are called Pat and Doreen, and you're going to lead them both to Christ. And I also see a picture, he said, of a man in an air pilot's uniform, and you're going to lead him to Christ as well. So she left the hospital. The 2 women she did lead to Christ in a life group setting fairly soon afterwards. But then the family moved away from San Diego and went to live in Phoenix in Arizona. Many years later, she was invited to go and speak to a women's convention in Salt Lake City. And so she flew from Phoenix to San Diego and was going to get a plane with her daughter, who she was taking with her, from San Diego to Salt Lake City, where she was speaking. So when they got on the plane, the daughter said to her, I wonder who is the pilot of this plane. And so they asked the stewardess who was the pilot, and they were told it was a man called Captain Alan Lindemann, who was the man who was married to one of the women she'd led to Christ. And so they sent a message to him and said to him, you know, we're flying on the plane. He sent a message back and said, can we have coffee in San Diego Airport? Sorry, in Salt Lake City Airport. So they had coffee in Salt Lake City Airport. And during that conversation, he said, you're the lady who was healed, weren't you? And who actually led my wife into a relationship with Christ. And she said, yes. But when the guy told me that I was going to do that, he also saw a picture of you in your pilot's uniform and said that you too were going to make a commitment. She shared the gospel with him, and he started to cry. And he did give his life to Christ. He said, but the most amazing thing about this whole story is that I never, ever fly from San Diego to Salt Lake City. I always fly from San Diego to San Francisco. I've never done this journey before. And he said, even more amazing than that is that tomorrow I will take this pilot's uniform off and never wear it again, because I am retiring.